for all those who have loved someone who was never meant to be safe. The rain came without warning, the way catastrophe always does. Valentina Greco had been asleep for exactly 47 minutes when her phone rang. She knew it was 47 because she had glanced at the clock when she finally closed her eyes. 1:13 in the morning. And she glanced at it again when the sharp, insistent buzzing yanked her out of a dreamless sleep. 2 a.m., the kind of hour that never brought anything gentle. She answered before she was fully conscious. Years of midwifery had trained her body to do that, to surface from sleep fast, to be present before her mind fully caught up with the moment. Valentina. The voice on the other end was male, low. Unhurried in the way of a man who had never had to rush toward anything in his life, because things came to him. Things were brought to him. This is Marco Valenti. She sat up in her dark bedroom in Cagliari, her cotton sheet pooling at her waist, and felt the cold immediately. Not from the air. It was July in Sardinia, perpetually warm even at this hour, but from the name. Marco Valenti. She had never met him, but she knew the name the way all Sardinians knew it, the way you knew the names of earthquakes and storms. You didn't have to have lived through one to understand its power. You simply knew. Mr. Valenti, she said, and was proud that her voice came out steady. Lucia is in labor. It has been 17 hours. A pause. Not the pause of a man composing his words, but the pause of a man deciding how much truth to offer. She is in difficulty. The doctor we have here is not... Another pause, shorter this time. He is not sufficient. Valentina was already standing. Her feet found the cool tile floor, and she moved toward the chair where she always laid her clothes the night before, a habit from nursing school that had never left her. Lucia Esposito, her brother's wife. She had known Lucia was pregnant, had spoken to her on the phone 6 weeks ago, but Lucia had told her that Marco had arranged for the finest obstetric team from Rome. Everything was handled, Lucia had said, in that particular way she had of smoothing over the parts of her life that were complicated. Everything is handled, Tina. Don't worry about me. Where are you? Valentina said. 30 kilometers north of Posada. There is a road, but it is not marked. He said it as a fact, not an apology. I will send someone to the highway junction at Siniscola. They will bring you. How dilated is she? I don't know. What does the doctor say about the fetal heart rate? He says the child is in distress. The words landed without inflection, but she heard something move beneath them, something tightly controlled. He has been saying this for 4 hours and doing nothing useful. Is the baby presenting head down? I don't know. A fraction of a pause. Will you come? Valentina buttoned her jeans with one hand and held the phone with the other, and looked at the window, where rain had begun to streak the glass in long silver lines. Lucia, her sister-in-law, her brother Dante's wife. The woman who had laughed too loudly at their mother's table and eaten thirds of everything, and once stayed up until 4 in the morning with Valentina, talking about whether God was real and what it meant if he wasn't. The woman who was currently in a compound owned by Marco Valenti, and who was losing a birth. I'm coming, she said. She drove to the junction in her ancient Fiat with her birth bag in the back seat, the rain intensifying with every kilometer, and thought about what she knew of Marco Valenti. She was 31 years old and had been born on this island, and the knowledge of him was woven into the fabric of Sardinian life in a way that was difficult to separate from anything else. He was 38. He had inherited leadership of the Valenti family at 26 when his father died of a heart attack, or what was reported as a heart attack, and in the 12 years since, he had expanded the family's operations into Sicily, into Naples, into the port cities of the mainland, and most significantly, into the legitimate world. Shipping, construction, hospitality, import. There were hotels, there was a vineyard, There was a foundation that funded schools in impoverished villages across the island, which Valentina's mother approved of deeply, and which Valentina herself found complicated. And then there was this. 3 years ago, her brother Dante had married Lucia Esposito, who was, as it turned out, Marco Valenti's first cousin. Lucia's mother and Marco's mother were sisters. Lucia had grown up between Rome and Cagliari, had met Dante at a mutual friend's wedding, and had fallen in love with a structural engineer in the way of a woman who had been raised around power and had decided she wanted something quieter. Valentina had liked her immediately and unreservedly. She had never met Marco. He had not attended Dante and Lucia's wedding, though he had sent a gift, a set of olive wood kitchen implements and a bottle of wine from his vineyard, that Lucia had received with a complicated expression and said nothing about. The headlights of a large black vehicle appeared at the junction ahead of her, parked with the engine running, and Valentina pulled off the road behind it. The man who got out of the car was large, with a waterproof jacket and the kind of expressionless face that suggested it was permanently default. He did not offer an umbrella. He opened the back door of the black car and waited. "My car," Valentina said. "Leave it. Someone will move it." He said this without inflection. An instruction, not a discussion. Valentina looked at him. She was not a small woman, 5'6", broad-shouldered in the way of a woman who worked physical work. But he was large in a way that was not about physical intimidation. It was about certainty. He was certain she would get in the car. She was certain she would get in the car. She simply wanted to do it on her own terms. She reached back into her Fiat and took her birth bag. Her phone. Her second phone. The one she used for professional communications. The small photo of her mother she kept in the glove compartment, for reasons she could not have articulated. Then she got in. They drove north through the rain for 30 minutes without speaking, turning off the main road onto a track that was unpaved but smooth, graded stone that the car handled easily, and then through a gate that opened as they approached and closed silently behind them. The mansion materialized out of the darkness and the rain, the way things sometimes did in dreams, all at once, impossible to have missed, and yet also somehow surprising. It was built into a hillside, 3 stories of pale stone with deep overhangs and tall windows that glowed amber from within. Not a fortress exactly, but something that had been designed to be difficult to leave. Valentina did not wait to be guided. She got out of the car with her bag and walked toward the entrance, and a door opened before she reached it. The man standing in the doorway was not who she expected. She had expected someone who looked like power. She had expected silk and authority, the groomed surface of a man who had bought his way to the top of every room. What she had not expected was this: a man in a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, standing barefoot on the stone floor of his own entrance hall, looking at her with dark eyes that did not perform anything at all. Marco Valenti was tall, broader than she had imagined, and leaner. His hair was dark and slightly disordered, as though he had been running his hands through it, and his jaw was sharp under the kind of stubble that was not styled, but simply there. He was objectively arresting, in the way that certain landscapes were arresting. The kind of beauty that was also a little dangerous, that made you want to look, even knowing you should look somewhere else. But it was the expression that caught her. He was looking at her the way you looked at something you had been waiting for, without knowing it. Not with urgency, not with relief, with something more contained than either, a quality of attention that was almost physical. "You're younger than I expected," he said. "And you're barefoot," she replied. "Where is she?" The house was larger inside than its exterior suggested, with high ceilings and wide corridors and the particular acoustics of old stone that made footsteps sound deliberate. Valentina followed Marco up a broad staircase, her bag over one shoulder, noting details with the automatic attention of someone who had trained herself to read environments quickly. Security cameras, but discreet. 2 men she passed in the lower hallway who were not wearing guns openly, but who stood in the loose, ready posture of people who were. Art on the walls. Real art, she thought, not decorative prints. A smell of wood polish and something floral, jasmine or gardenia, drifting from somewhere. And then, through a closed door on the second floor, the unmistakable sound of a woman in hard labor. Valentina did not wait. She opened the door and went in. The room was large and well-appointed, with a hospital-grade bed that had clearly been brought in. It was too functional for the space, incongruous against the beautiful linen curtains and the tiled floor. And it was lit by two bright portable lights that someone had arranged around it. There were two people already in the room, a nurse who looked exhausted and frightened, and a man in his 60s who was, she presumed, the doctor, and who looked both defensive and relieved by her arrival, in a combination she recognized immediately. The doctor who has run out of competence and is waiting for someone else to take the blame or the credit. And there was Lucia. Lucia, who was 30 years old and had Dante's eyes in her memory, though they had nothing genetically in common. They simply both had that particular quality of openness, of being present without armor. Lucia, who was not like that now. Lucia was pale and sweating and gripping the metal rail of the bed with both hands, and when Valentina came into her field of vision, something complicated moved across her face. Relief, shame, love. The specific anguish of a woman who needed help and had not wanted to need it. "Oh, Tina," she said, "I'm here." Valentina was already setting down her bag, already moving to the side of the bed, already putting her hands on Lucia's arm in the specific pressure that meant, "I am present, I am competent, you are not alone. I'm here, talk to me." The next hour was the kind of hour that collapsed time. Valentina did her assessment, the doctor hovering, the nurse watching with something like awe, Marco Valenti standing in the doorway, which she could feel without looking at him, and found what she had feared. The baby was posterior. Occiput posterior, the back of the baby's skull pressing against Lucia's spine with every contraction, which was the reason the labor had stalled, and the reason Lucia was in the particular agonized exhaustion of a woman who had been fighting her own body for 17 hours. "He's sunny side up," Valentina said, keeping her voice calm. "That's why it's taking so long. We're going to help him turn." "Him?" Lucia managed. "Or her. I don't know yet. But the heart rate is strong." It was, just barely, strong enough. "You've been doing beautifully, Lucia. Now I need you to do it differently." What followed was the demanding, specific, unglamorous work of midwifery. Repositioning, movement, the careful management of a labor that had gone long and difficult, and was now, under Valentina's hands, beginning to find its way. She talked Lucia through every step. She explained what she was doing and why. She ignored the doctor, who twice tried to suggest interventions that were not indicated, and once, quietly, had to speak to him in a tone that was not unkind, but left no ambiguity. She was aware of Marco in the doorway the entire time, not as a distraction, but as a presence, steady and watching, and she did not have the emotional space to examine what that meant. At some point, he brought her water without being asked, setting a glass on the table beside her, and she drank it without breaking her rhythm. At 4:47 in the morning, in the gray beginning of a Sardinian dawn, with rain still tapping the tall windows, Lucia's daughter came into the world. She came fast at the end, after hours of slowness, the way things sometimes did, after patience and work and the body finally understanding what was being asked of it. Valentina caught her with both hands, her heart doing what it always did at this particular moment, the same thing it had done at every birth she had attended in 9 years of practice, which was to perform a kind of involuntary expansion that she had never found the right word for. The baby cried, lusty, indignant, perfectly formed. Lucia made a sound that had no word in any language. Valentina placed the baby on Lucia's chest, made sure the cord was handled correctly, watched Lucia's arms close around this new person who had been so difficult to reach, and felt the familiar flooding of a feeling she never let herself examine too closely during births, because it would undo her. "She's perfect," she said. Lucia was crying. The nurse was crying. The doctor, to his credit, had the decency to look moved. Valentina became aware, at some point in the stillness that followed, that the doorway was empty. Marco had left. She stayed with Lucia for another hour, the afterbirth, the initial assessments, making sure that what needed to be stable was stable. She spoke with the nurse. She wrote brief notes. She drank the second glass of water that had appeared without her noticing, this one cold, with ice. When she finally stepped out of the room, pulling the door to behind her, the corridor was quiet. The pale light of early morning came through a window at the end of the hall. She leaned against the wall for a moment, letting herself just breathe, letting the accumulated tension of the last hours move through her and begin to release. She heard footsteps. Not hurried, not slow. The particular footfall of someone who walked as though the floor was certain beneath them. Marco Valenti came around the corner of the corridor and stopped when he saw her. He had a glass of something amber in one hand, and his shirt was still rolled at the elbows, and he looked at her with an expression she could not read. Something vast and still, like the surface of deep water. "Well?" he said. "A girl," Valentina said. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Both of them are fine. He said nothing for a moment, just looked at her. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. She had been thanked after births in many ways, with tears, with embraces, with money thrust into her hands, with prayers in languages she didn't speak. She had been thanked with extravagance, and with quiet, and with everything in between. But something about the way this man said those 2 words, measured, direct, with the weight of someone who did not say things carelessly, went through her differently. "It's my job," she said. It was more than that. He looked at her, steady. "You should sleep. I'll have a room prepared. I need to get back to Cagliari. The road is flooded. It has been since 2 hours ago." He said it without apology or emphasis, the way he said most things. "You're staying tonight. There's no discussion." Valentina looked at him. She was 31 years old and accustomed to being direct, and she was very tired, and she recognized when an argument was not worth the effort. "Fine," she said. "But I want breakfast before I leave tomorrow. Real breakfast, not hotel food." Something moved in his expression. If it was amusement, it was the most contained amusement she had ever seen. "I'll tell the kitchen," he said. She slept for 4 hours in a room that was the most beautiful room she had ever slept in, though she was too exhausted to appreciate it at the time. The bed was linen, and the curtains were silk, and the window, when she finally woke and pulled them open, looked out over a terraced hillside where olive trees stood in silver-green rows against a sea that was the color of pewter under the clearing sky. The rain had stopped. She stood at the window in the white shirt she'd found folded on the bed. Not her shirt, someone else's, clean and soft and smelling of nothing except laundering, and looked at the landscape and thought about what she was doing here. The answer was complicated in the way that most things involving Lucia were complicated. Lucia had married Dante, whom Valentina loved unreservedly, the way you love a sibling who has always been easy to love, steady, reliable, good-humored. Dante was an engineer who had built 3 bridges in Sardinia and a 4th in Calabria, and who collected vintage maps and made his own bread on Sundays. He was, in the simplest possible terms, a good man. And he had married Lucia, who was also a good woman, and who was also, through no fault of her own, connected by blood to one of the most significant criminal families on the island. It was not something Valentina spent a great deal of time thinking about, because it was not something she could change. She had her own life, her work, which she loved, her apartment in Cagliari near the sea, modest and cluttered with books, her friendships, her patience, the daily satisfying difficulty of her profession. What she had not had, in a long time, was the particular awareness she was currently experiencing of another human being's presence. She put that thought away, firmly, with both hands. The bathroom was all warm stone, and a shower so generous she stood in it longer than necessary. And when she emerged and dressed in yesterday's clothes, She descended to the ground floor and followed the smell of coffee. The kitchen was large and professional, with a woman of 60 or so moving efficiently through it, who looked up when Valentina entered, but did not stop moving. On the long wooden table in the center of the room was a breakfast that was, in the most literal sense, exactly what she had asked for. Real breakfast, not hotel food. There were eggs, soft scrambled, with herbs from what she suspected was a garden she had glimpsed from the window. There was bread, dark and dense, with butter and honey in ceramic pots. There were olives and cheese and tomatoes that tasted like tomatoes were supposed to taste. There was coffee in a pot, not a machine, and it was perfect. Marco was already there. He was sitting at the far end of the table with a small cup of espresso and a newspaper that he was not, she noticed, actually reading. He was watching her enter the room with the specific quality of attention she was beginning to identify as his default setting when she was in his vicinity. "Good morning," she said. "You slept." "I did." She sat down across from him, not at the far end, not deferentially close, just at a natural distance, and poured herself coffee. "How is Lucia?" "Awake, happy." A pause. "Different." He said this last word with a kind of puzzled wonder, as though happiness in someone he cared about was a phenomenon he found inexplicable. New mothers are different. Valentina took a piece of bread and buttered it. "It doesn't wear off." "No," he said. He was still looking at her. "I imagine it doesn't." She looked up and met his eyes directly. She had the habit, from years of clinical work, of not looking away from difficult things, and found that looking directly at Marco Valenti was a particular kind of difficult. Not because of threat, because of intensity. There was a quality to his attention that was almost tactile, that made her aware of herself in a way she was not generally aware. The space between them felt occupied by something. "You should know," she said, "that I'm going to check on Lucia weekly for the next month." "I know. Which means I'll be back." "I know that too." A pause. The woman in the kitchen made a sound with pots. Outside, through the tall windows, the olive trees were beginning to catch the early light. "I don't know what the arrangement is," Valentina said, "between you and Lucia and Dante. It's not my business. But she's my family, and the baby is my family, and I'm telling you plainly that I intend to be involved." "I'm not stopping you," Marco said. The words were simple, but the tone was layered. She heard in it something that was not quite an invitation, but was closer to one than an acknowledgement. "Good." She ate her eggs, which were exactly as good as they had smelled. "This is excellent food. Julia has been cooking here for 20 years. He glanced toward the older woman, who did not look up. "She would be pleased to hear you say so." "Then tell her." Valentina looked at Julia. "Grazie. Veramente. Questa è la miglior colazione che ho mai mangiato." "Thank you, truly. This is the best breakfast I've ever had." Julia turned. She had a broad face and dark eyes, and she looked at Valentina for a moment with an expression of assessment that was not unlike Marco's in its quality of frankness. "Prego, dottoressa," she said. Then she turned back to the stove. Valentina looked at Marco. "Does she talk to you like that?" "Less." He said it with perfect seriousness. "She's known me since I was 12. Valentina found herself smiling, which she had not expected. That explains it. They ate in a silence that was not uncomfortable. Outside, a car arrived in the courtyard and left again. Somewhere in the house, the baby cried with the healthy, declarative cry of a newborn, announcing her presence to an indifferent world, and then stopped. Valentina drank her second cup of coffee and listened to the sound of the island morning. Birds, wind, the distant suggestion of the sea, and felt, despite everything, entirely at peace. "Your brother," Marco said, out of the silence. "He doesn't know you're here." It was not a question. "No," she said. "I didn't have time to call him. I'll call when I get back." "He'll want to come." "Yes." "The road will be clear by noon." Another statement without inflection. I'll have someone drive you back whenever you're ready. I can drive myself. Your car is there. He nodded toward the window. Her ancient Fiat was in the courtyard. She could see it now, neatly parked. But the drive is long, and you haven't slept enough. I'd rather... He stopped. She watched him notice himself and recalibrate. I would prefer, he said, if you let someone drive you. As a practical matter. As a practical matter, she repeated. Yes. She looked at him for a moment. At the sharp jaw and the dark eyes and the white linen shirt and the particular way he held stillness, as though movement were something he only bothered with when it was necessary. Fine, she said, but I drive my own car. He considered this. Agreed, he said. Dante cried. He was not a man who cried easily. He was the kind of person who absorbed difficulty inward, processing it slowly and alone. But when Valentina called him from the road with the windows down and the sea on her left side, and the sun finally burning off the last of the rain, she told him about the birth, and about the baby, and about the fact that Lucia was fine, and he was silent for a long moment, and then she heard it, the specific catch in a grown man's throat that meant something had broken through. She didn't tell me, he said. I didn't know she was in difficulty. She said everything was fine. She said, Lucia was protecting you, Valentina said gently. She does that. It's a habit. She shouldn't... He stopped. I should have been there. You're there now. Go to her. Marco called a car for me this morning, before you called me. A pause. He called and said the birth was done, and that I should come. Valentina absorbed this. He called you himself? Yes. I was surprised. Another pause. I've met him twice, at Lucia's parents' events. He's... Dante searched for words in the careful way of a man who chose them. He's not what you expect. He pays attention in a way that makes you feel like you should say something worth paying attention to. Yes, Valentina said, and then stopped. She heard Dante noticing her yes. He called you, Dante said. In the middle of the night, yes. And you went. Of course you went. She could hear him working through the layers of it. How was it, being there? Strange, she said honestly. Beautiful, in places. And strange. She let Dante go. He had a car to catch, and a wife to hold, and a daughter to meet for the first time. And she drove the rest of the way to Cagliari, with the windows down, and her hair coming loose in the wind, and thought about nothing in particular. Her phone rang when she was 20 minutes from home. The number was unknown. Dr. Greco? His voice. She had already learned to recognize it, with a speed that was slightly unsettling. Mr. Valenti? Marco. The word was a small correction, offered without urgency. She paused. Marco. Your brother arrived safely. He called me. Good. A pause. I want to talk to you about Lucia's care, going forward. I told you I'd be back weekly. I want to discuss more than that. His tone was the same as it always was, even, direct, without performance. But she heard something beneath it that she recognized from the morning, from the breakfast table, from the way his expression had shifted when she said she would be back. Would you consider being her primary practitioner? For the postpartum period and beyond? I'm a midwife, not an OBGYN. You know better than I do what you are. I'm asking if you'll take the case. Valentina drove in silence for a moment. The sea was on her left, brilliant now in the full morning sun, and the coast road was clear and winding and familiar, and she was thinking about the practical complications of what he was suggesting, and also about the other, less practical complications. There are protocols, she said, things I'd need in place, medical backup, emergency access. Whatever you need. I work on my own terms. I understand that. I'm not part of your staff, Marco. I'm not someone you can direct. A pause, longer this time. I know what you are, he said. And the way he said it, quiet, certain, with that particular quality of attention he brought to everything, moved through her like a current. She pulled her car to the side of the coast road and sat with the engine idling and the sound of the sea coming through the window and thought about Lucia, who was lying in that stone house 30 kilometers north of Posada, with her daughter on her chest and her husband beside her. Thought about what it meant to be needed, what it meant to have done something real. "I'll come back Tuesday," she said. "We'll discuss the terms then." "I'll be there." She ended the call and sat for another minute looking at the sea. Then she pulled back onto the road and drove home. Tuesday came. The drive north was different in daylight, without urgency, without rain. The island showed itself generously. The inland hills with their granite outcroppings, and the maquis scrub already dry and fragrant in the July heat. The occasional village with its old stone and its shuttered siesta windows. The road that wound toward the northern coast, with the sea appearing and disappearing behind hills. She had called ahead. The gate opened as she arrived. Marco met her in the entrance hall, and this time he was wearing shoes. Dark trousers, a gray shirt, nothing that suggested performance. He looked at her for a moment, with that quality she was beginning to think of simply as his gaze, specific and complete. "Lucia is upstairs," he said. "She's been asking about you every 4 hours." "That's about how often a newborn feeds," Valentina said. "Sounds right." The ghost of something moved across his face. Lucia was, in fact, doing beautifully. The baby, Alessia, she had been named, for Marco's grandmother, was healthy and feeding well, and possessed of a quantity of dark hair that made her look, Valentina thought privately, like a small, outraged philosopher. Lucia was tired with the particular tiredness of early motherhood, which was different from any other kind of tiredness in that it was inhabited by joy. They talked for an hour, the three of them, with Alessia sleeping on Lucia's chest and the window open on the afternoon sea. Lucia talked about Dante, about how he had wept and hadn't apologized for it, about the way he had held Alessia with the specific reverence of a man who had built bridges and knew something about weight and bearing. Valentina watched Lucia's color, her affect, her movement, with the clinical attention that never entirely switched off, and found everything she was looking for. "You saved us," Lucia said at some point. "I helped you through," Valentina said. "That's not—" Lucia stopped. "Tina, look at me." Valentina looked. "You saved us," Lucia said again, simply. Valentina held this. She had learned, over years, to accept gratitude without deflecting it entirely. It was disrespectful to the people who felt it, but she was never comfortable with it. She nodded. Lucia reached out and squeezed her hand. Downstairs, after, Marco was waiting in a room she hadn't seen before. A study with books on 3 walls and a window looking west, and a desk that was large but not ostentatious. He was standing when she came in, which she noted. He did not sit while she stood. They discussed terms. He listened with complete attention to everything she said, and agreed to things without negotiation that she had expected to fight for, and asked questions that were direct and specific, and revealed a comprehensive understanding of what Lucia's postpartum care would require. "You've done research," she said. "I had 3 days." "You researched midwifery in 3 days." "I research everything that matters to me." He said it simply. Valentina looked at him across the desk. At the books behind him, which were not there for show. They were red, spined with use, multiple bookmarks sticking from several of them. At his hands on the desk, still and large and capable looking. At the quality of stillness he carried everywhere. "Why does this matter to you?" she said. "You have money. You could hire anyone." He looked at her. "I did hire anyone," he said. "You saw how that went." "That's not what I mean." A pause. He held her gaze. "I know what you mean," he said. "I don't have an answer that would satisfy you yet." Yet. The words sat between them in the afternoon light. "All right," she said, I'll take the case." The weeks that followed had a structure that Valentina had not anticipated, a rhythm built around Tuesdays. Every Tuesday she drove north, through the island's interior or along its coast, depending on her mood, with her bag in the back seat and the radio on, and the particular feeling of moving towards something rather than simply going somewhere. She stayed for 3 to 4 hours. She checked Lucia and the baby. She sometimes stayed for dinner, which she told herself was for the continuity of care, because postpartum depression and adjustment could surface in the social fabric of a woman's life, and it was clinically relevant to observe Lucia in her daily environment. This was partly true. Marco was not always there for the full visit. He had businesses to run, operations that took him to the mainland 2 or 3 times a month, a life that she was aware of mostly through absence and implication. But he was there on enough Tuesdays that it had become, without either of them naming it, part of the pattern. He would appear somewhere during her visit, sometimes at the beginning, sometimes at the end, sometimes, increasingly, in the middle. He would come into the room where she and Lucia were talking and seat himself in the far chair and listen, without contributing unless directly addressed, which at first she found territorial and then, gradually, realized was not that at all. He listened. He was interested. He was the kind of man who considered other people's conversations worth attending to. After her 3rd visit, he walked her to her car. It was early evening, the light going golden and long, and the olive trees on the terraced hill were a solid mass of silver-green shadow, and the sea was pink at the edge of the world. "She's adjusting well," Valentina said, meaning Lucia. "Yes," he looked at the sea. "Dante is talking about moving closer, finding something in the north, near here." He mentioned that. She unlocked her car. "He'd like it. He's happier near the coast." "And you?" The question was direct, without prologue. "I live in Cagliari." "I know." He turned from the sea to look at her. "Is that an answer?" She considered him. The evening light on the side of his face, the specific architecture of his attention. "I'm asking if you're happy where you are." "Clinically," she said. Something moved in his expression. "No." She opened the car door. "You know very little about me," she said. "I know you're 31. I know you trained in Florence and Rome before coming back to Sardinia. I know you work primarily with high-risk pregnancies, and you have a success rate that most obstetricians would find embarrassing to be surpassed by. I know you have a cat named after a Roman emperor." "How do you know about the cat?" "Lucia, she talks about you constantly." He said this without apology. "I know you like red wine and won't drink espresso after 6 in the evening. I know you read historical fiction and keep it slightly hidden as though it's less serious than it is." He paused. "I know that when something frightens you, you go very still rather than moving. The way you did in the corridor after the birth." Valentina stood by her open car door and looked at him. "You were watching me." "Yes." "That's—" She stopped. "I know," he said. "But I've stopped pretending I don't." She got into her car. He stepped back. She started the engine and pulled around the courtyard and out through the gate, and drove for 20 minutes in complete silence before she allowed herself to have any coherent thought about what had just happened. He had been watching her. He had catalogued her. He had said it without shame or manipulation, the way a man stated a fact that had become too large to keep quiet. And there had been nothing threatening in it. It had been, if anything, disarmingly honest, the specific honesty of someone who had decided that pretense was more expensive than truth. She pulled over on the coast road and sat for a moment with the engine running and the evening sea filling her windshield. Then she called her friend Sarah, who was a nurse in Cagliari and also the most direct person Valentina knew. "There's a man," she said. A pause. "I need more than that," Sarah said. "I know." "Is he dangerous?" Valentina thought about this, about Marco standing barefoot in his entrance hall at 2 in the morning, about the way he had brought her water during the birth without being asked. about the single word, yet, and what it had suggested about his relationship with time. Probably, she said. For you specifically? I don't know, she said honestly. That's the problem. What kind of problem is it? Valentina looked at the sea going dark in the western sky. The interesting kind, she said. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, tell me everything. On the 5th Tuesday of her visits, Valentina arrived to find the house different. Not in any specific nameable way. The stone was the same, the courtyard the same, Julia moving through the kitchen in her familiar, efficient orbit. But there was a quality to the air, a density, that she recognized from the first night without being able to say why. Men at the edges of things, eyes tracking movement. The held breath quality of a place where something was either happening or about to. Lucia was in the sitting room with Alessia and registered Valentina's entrance with an expression of relief that was too large to be only about the clinical visit. "What's happening?" Valentina said when the door was closed. Lucia looked at Alessia, and then at the window, and then at Valentina. Marco had a meeting last week on the mainland. Something went wrong. She pressed her lips together. 2 of his men were hurt. Valentina set down her bag. Hurt how? I don't ask, Lucia said. I never ask. This was, Valentina knew, the specific discipline of a woman who had been raised around this world. You learned the exact geography of what you were permitted to know, and you lived inside it, and you did not test its borders, because you had been taught, early, what happened when you did. Is Marco all right? Lucia looked at her with an expression of precise attention. Why? Valentina met this question squarely. Because I'm here every week, and he lives in this house. A pause. Lucia rearranged Alessia on her shoulder with a care that was partly maternal and partly time-buying. He's fine. He arrived back this morning. Valentina did the clinical visit with her full attention, and Lucia and Alessia were both exactly as they should be. And when it was done, Lucia held her for a moment at the door. He talks about you, Lucia said quietly. Lucia, not to me directly, but in the way that people talk around something, the way you can hear the shape of what isn't being said. She pulled back and looked at Valentina. I know this world is not what you would choose. I know my life is complicated in ways yours isn't. But he's... She stopped. He's a different person when you're here. I can't explain it better than that. Valentina took this and said nothing. She was gathering her bag in the entrance hall when he came in from outside. He was wearing the same dark quality she'd seen on him once before. Not agitation exactly, but the post-event compression of a man who had had to hold things tightly and was releasing the pressure slowly. He saw her and stopped. Tuesday, he said, as though he'd forgotten. Every week, she confirmed. He looked at her. He had a cut above his left eyebrow, recently closed, the kind that suggested a specific exchange of force. She noticed it without expression. Lucia and Alessia, he said, both excellent. He nodded. He looked, she thought, exhausted in a way that was not physical. He had the particular tiredness of someone who had been holding a great deal of weight and had not yet found anywhere to set it down. Against every professional judgment she possessed, she said, Do you want to sit down? He looked at her. Whatever he was expecting, it was not that. Yes, he said, I do. They sat in the study. Julia brought coffee without being asked and did not stay. The evening was coming in gold at the windows, and the sea was distant and luminous, and Marco sat across from her in the chair he always used, and for a while said nothing. My father used to say, he said eventually, that the cost of this life was that you spent it solving problems you created. He looked at his coffee. I thought for a long time that this was wisdom. Now I think it might have been a warning. What happened? She said. Nothing I can tell you about. He looked up. Not because I don't trust you, Because I don't want this, he gestured between them, a small, specific motion, to have that in it. She looked at him. The cut above his eye, the tiredness, the specific intimacy of a person who was being honest about the limits of what they could share. That's a complicated way to keep someone at a distance, she said. I'm not trying to keep you at a distance. He said it simply, directly, with the quality she had come to expect. I'm trying to do the opposite. The silence after this was different from the silences before. It had weight. It had direction. Marco, she said. I know, he said. I know what you're going to say. Then perhaps I won't say it. He looked at her. His eyes were very dark and very still, and there was something in them that was not what she had expected from a man of his history. Not hardness, not calculation. Something more fundamental, more costly. Stay for dinner, he said. She should have said no. She had a 90-minute drive and an early morning patient, and she should have said no. All right, she said. They ate at the long table in the kitchen, with Julia moving about them like a benign planet in its own orbit, serving and then disappearing. And Lucia and Dante were there. Dante had been coming more frequently, staying longer, and the northern coast was beginning to feel less like a destination and more like a home to both of them. And the baby slept in a bassinet nearby with the imperturbable gravity of the very recently born. The conversation at the table moved the way good conversation did, without effort, without agenda, touching and releasing and returning. Dante talked about the bridge project in Calabria, which was having funding complications. Lucia talked about a documentary she had been watching about Ottoman Constantinople. Marco asked Valentina, out of what seemed to be a genuine and specific interest, about the history of midwifery, when it had professionalized, how the role had changed, where the conflicts with obstetrics had originated. You're asking because you want to understand why I do what I do, she said. I'm asking because I'm interested in the work. He poured wine for her before pouring his own. She noticed this. But yes, both. Because you want to understand me? I want to understand everything about you. He said it with the same directness he brought to everything, without coyness, without performance. Across the table, Dante's expression showed that he had heard this and was deciding what to do with it. Valentina held Marco's gaze. That's a comprehensive ambition. I have time. Dante made a sound that was almost a laugh and converted it into a sip of wine. Lucia looked at the ceiling. My brother is sitting right there, Valentina said. I know, Marco said. I would say it with him absent, but I'm less likely to misrepresent myself in front of a witness. Dante set down his glass. He looked at Marco with the assessing expression of a man who built things and understood load-bearing. You're telling me, he said, rather than asking me. You don't have the right to give or withhold permission over your sister, Marco said. I'm not informing you of a claim. I'm being honest about an interest. He looked at Dante steadily. I respect you. I respect what your family is to Lucia. I'm not asking for approval, but I'm not hiding either. A silence. Dante looked at his wine, then at Valentina. Well, he said to her. Don't look at me like that, she said. I'm your brother. I'm allowed. What does that expression even mean? It means I've known you for 31 years, and I haven't seen you... He stopped. It means I'm noting something. Please note it quietly. Lucia made a sound that was definitely a laugh, quickly covered. Alessia stirred in the bassinet, yawned, and was still. After dinner, Marco walked her to her car again. It was full dark now, the sky enormous overhead, the stars showing with the specific brilliance they had away from city light. The air smelled of rosemary and the sea. Your brother doesn't disapprove, he said. My brother is far too diplomatic to express disapproval directly. She unlocked the car. He'll tell me, privately and carefully. And I'll listen to him and make my own decision. She turned to face him. That's how it works. He was close in the darkness. Not threatening close, just present close. The kind of proximity that had its own gravity. She could see the line of his jaw, the cut above his eye, the specific quality of his stillness. "There are things about my life," he said, "that are not simple. I know. I want you to know them honestly, not sanitized. You told me you couldn't tell me what happened this week. That specific event, no. The shape of the world I operate in, yes." He paused. "The risk it carries, the consequences it has had, the choices it requires." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not asking you to approve of it. I'm telling you I won't lie about it." Valentina stood in the dark of the Sardinian night and looked at this man who was offering her, with complete clarity, something that was not safe, but was at least honest, and felt the specific pull of it, not toward danger, but toward truth. "All right," she said. "All right to which part?" "All of it. Tell me." She paused. "Not tonight, but tell me." He nodded. He stepped back. He let her get in the car without reaching for her, without any gesture that would have been a pressure. And this restraint, she recognized it with a kind of clarity. This was the most deliberate thing he had done. She drove home in the dark and arrived at her apartment at midnight and stood in her kitchen feeding Caligula, who was a large orange cat named for the worst emperor in Roman history for reasons that were now self-explanatory, and thought about honesty. She thought about the difference between knowing something was complicated and letting the complication be true. She thought about the specific texture of Marco Valenti's silence and how it was different from every other silence she had known. Then she went to bed and lay awake for precisely 40 minutes, thinking about nothing in particular. He took her to the vineyard at the end of August. Not the North Coast compound. The vineyard was inland, in the Ogliastra region, in the middle of the island where the hills rose steeply from the sea and the soil was dark, and the Cannonau grapes grew in the specific manner of things that had grown somewhere for so long they had become inseparable from it. The estate was smaller than the northern house, less conspicuous, less guarded, more private in the genuine sense of a place that had been loved and lived in, rather than secured. He drove her himself, which she had not expected. She had assumed there would be a driver, one of the silent, capable men she'd come to recognize as fixtures of his world. But he came to collect her from Cagliari in a car that he drove himself, and when she got in, he said, "I thought you might want to see it in the right light. Morning is better." "You came to Cagliari to collect me, rather than having someone else do it," she said. "Yes." She considered this as they left the city. "That took you 2 hours round trip." It did. She looked out the window. Marco. Valentina. "Are you always this deliberate?" He was quiet for a moment, turning south on the road that would take them inland. "Yes," he said. The vineyard was everything she had not known to expect. It was August, and the harvest was weeks away, and the vines were heavy with the beginning of ripeness, the rows running up the hillside with a precision that was beautiful in the way that well-made, useful things were beautiful. The house itself was low and stone, with a long terrace facing west, and it smelled of what she would later identify as her most accurate sense memory of that summer: basalt and grape leaf, and the particular dryness of island heat. He showed her the cellar. He talked about the wine with the specific knowledge of someone who had been interested in something for years, not as performance, but as pleasure. He showed her the amphora, the large terracotta vessels in which some of the wine was aged, which was an ancient practice this region had never entirely abandoned. "You make it yourself," she said, not as a question. "With Antonio. He's been here since before me." Marco touched the neck of an amphora with a brief, possessive affection that she found unexpectedly moving. "My father planted these rows. He did very little that I would recommend otherwise, but he did this." She looked at him sideways. "What else did he do?" A pause. He considered. "He gave me this island," he said, his version of it, with everything it entailed. He looked at the amphora. "I've tried to make something different, out of the same material. I'm not sure how successful I've been. You built schools. He looked at her. You know about that. My mother talks about it. She held his gaze. She has no idea whose name is on the foundation. She simply thinks whoever built the school in Orgosolo has good priorities. Your mother is right, he said, simply. They walked the rows in the late morning, which took an hour, and he named the varietals and explained the soil composition, and she listened with genuine attention, and also with the secondary attention she had been giving him since the first night. The way he moved through a place he loved, which was unhurried and attentive. The way his voice changed when he talked about things he cared about, losing the contained quality it had in other contexts and becoming something warmer. On the terrace in the afternoon, Antonio's wife brought out wine. Not from this vineyard, she explained, but from a neighbor's, because it was not done to drink your own wine when you could drink a friend's. And olives and cheese, and they sat in the long light, and Marco said, "Tell me about Florence." She told him. Her training, her mentors, the woman she had apprenticed with in her final year who was 83 years old and had been attending births since 1965 and who had told Valentina after her first solo delivery that the most important thing in the room was not the practitioner's skill, but her capacity to be present without fear. "What does that mean to you?" Marco asked. "It means that the people you attend carry your fear into their bodies," she said. "They feel it. It communicates itself through your hands, your voice, the speed of your movements. If you're afraid, they're more afraid. You have to be steady." He was watching her. "And are you? Steady?" "In the room, yes. Afterward," she stopped. "After," he said gently. "After is different. The difficult births stay with you. The ones that nearly went wrong. You carry them." She looked at the vineyard. "Lucha's was the most frightened I've been in years." She didn't see that. "No. I did," he said quietly. "In the corridor, after, when you leaned against the wall." He paused. "You were shaking slightly. You probably don't know that." She looked at him. He was watching her with the dark, steady gaze, and there was in it something she had been trying to locate for months. Not possession, though there was possession in it. Something older, more fundamental. "You were watching me when I thought you had left," she said. "I never left," he said. She absorbed this. The afternoon light, the wine, the smell of the island, the specific, impossible nature of the man beside her. "Marco," she said. "I know," he said. "No," she said, "you don't. I was going to say—" She stopped. She looked at the rows of vines going up the hill, heavy with the unripe harvest. "I was going to say that it matters, that you stayed. That's all." He was quiet for a long time. "Yes," he said, "it does." The first time she saw the other part of his world was in September. Lucia had wanted to celebrate. Alessia was 6 weeks old and sleeping 5-hour stretches, and Lucia's recovery was complete and she wanted a night out, which she announced with the particular determination of a woman who had been confined to a stone house for 6 weeks and was fully prepared to be unreasonable about it. "The Vetro," she said, "Marco's place. Come on Saturday." Valentina had heard of the Vetro the way most people heard of it, as a destination that existed in the upper register of the island's nightlife, where the clientele was international and the drinks cost what the average worker made in 2 days, and the music was good in a way that suggested the DJ had been paid serious money to be good. It was in Cagliari, in the old harbor district, in a building that had been, Valentina believed, a customs warehouse in the 19th century. She wore what she owned that was closest to right for such a place. A dark red dress that her mother had once said was too much, and Sarah had once said was not enough, both of which was probably correct. She met Lucia at the door, where Dante and a man she didn't know were already waiting. Marco was inside. She saw him before he saw her, which gave her the unfair advantage of watching him in his natural environment without being watched herself. He was at a table in the upper level, which overlooked the main floor without being above it, and he was with 3 men she didn't know, and a woman who was spectacularly beautiful, and who was saying something to him with the practiced social ease of someone who was accustomed to his attention. He was listening to the woman with the surface courtesy of a man who was performing rather than present. Then he saw Valentina. The performance stopped. It was not dramatic. He did not rise, did not wave, did not change expression. He simply became present in a different way, the way a room changes when a particular light is turned on. The beautiful woman noticed the change. She turned to see its cause. She looked at Valentina with an assessment that was thorough and professional and entirely dispassionate, as though she were evaluating a competitor's position rather than a person. Marco stood and came down from the upper level. "You came," he said. The room was loud with music and the specific hum of many wealthy people in a small space, and he was speaking directly to her at a normal volume, and she could hear him perfectly. Lucia was very insistent. She was. He looked at her, at the dress, at the way she'd done her hair, back and slightly pinned, which was her concession to the formality of the occasion. His expression was not the polite appreciation of a host acknowledging a guest. It was the specific expression of a man looking at something he had been wanting to look at for a long time. "You look—" He stopped. "Careful," she said. "Exactly right," he said. They were brought to the table. The 3 men made introductions, names she would remember, though she recognized their quality immediately. Not social, not decorative, not what they appeared. The beautiful woman was Sophia, who worked in event coordination, and who shook Valentina's hand with a grip that said she was assessing Valentina rather than greeting her. "The midwife," Sophia said. Her Italian was Roman accented, educated. "Yes," Valentina said. "Marco has mentioned you." "Has he?" "Frequently." Sophia's expression was not unkind. It was merely precise. Though mentioned might be an overstatement. Spoken about at length is more accurate. Marco, beside her, was entirely unperturbed by this. "Sophia is my director of operations for the mainland clubs," he said. "She speaks plainly." "I can see that," Valentina said. "It's not a warning," Sophia said. "I just wanted you to know, in case it was useful to you." And then she moved on to speak with someone else, with the practiced elegance of a woman who said what she had to say and did not require a reaction. Valentina looked at Marco. "She's interesting. She's known me for 10 years. She's entitled. To tell me you talk about me frequently?" "Apparently." He did not look remotely embarrassed. "Would you like to dance?" "Are you serious?" "No, I don't dance." He paused. "But I'd like to be on that floor with you." This was the most irrational sentence he had said to her, and she believed it completely, and found herself standing and following him to the floor below. They didn't dance exactly. They moved together in the way people did in crowded rooms, close, responsive to the music without performing, and she was aware of his hand at the small of her back and the specific degree to which she was not objecting to it. "Sophia," she said, against the music. "What about her?" "Were you and she ever—" "No." Direct, immediate, without irritation. "She would tell you the same. She has a wife. They have a house in Liguria and 3 dogs. He paused. "She's one of 2 people I trust completely." "Who's the other?" He looked at her. "Not yet," he said. She would think about that "not yet" later, lying in her own bed, in her own apartment. The implication of it. The patience. The night went long, and the music shifted registers, and Lucia danced with Dante in a way that suggested the night away was doing everything she had needed it to do. At some point, Valentina found herself at the bar with Marco, not because they had decided to go there, but because the crowd had moved, and they had moved with it. And they were standing close, with the bar behind them, and the room spread before them. And he was not touching her, but she was aware of the possibility of it, like a weather system. I don't want to be a complication in your life, she said. He looked at her steadily. Then don't be. You know what I mean. I do, he said, and I'm telling you that you're not a complication. You're the absence of one. He paused. Everything before you has been complicated. She looked at him. The bar light was low and gold, and in it he was devastatingly present. The specific, dangerous beauty of him not reduced, but somehow more accessible, as though the night had stripped one layer of the surface. That's a significant thing to say, she said. I know. He did not look away. I've been thinking about it for 3 months. I'm confident. October came with the first real cold. Not Italian cold, but island cold, which was different. The kind that came off the sea sideways and said, I was here before you, and I'll be here when you're gone. She was in the north on a Wednesday. Not her Tuesday, but an extra visit because Lucia had called with a concern about breastfeeding that turned out to be minor, but which Valentina came for anyway. When Marco arrived back from the mainland in the late afternoon, came through the door, saw her in the sitting room with Lucia and Alessia, and stopped. You're here, he said. She had a concern, Valentina said. It was nothing, Lucia added quickly. He sat down. He did not go to change or make phone calls or tend to whatever the mainland had required of him. He simply sat down across from them and let the afternoon settle. Later, Lucia took Alessia upstairs for feeding and bed, and Dante was not yet arrived from his work, and Valentina and Marco were alone in the sitting room, with the wind from the sea coming against the windows. Tell me, she said. He looked at her. You said you would, she said. The shape of it, not the specifics, the shape. He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor and then at her. My father was not a good man, he said. He was effective and intelligent, and he had a quality of command that I have inherited, and for which I am not grateful. He built something that made our family safe and wealthy and powerful, and it was built on things I won't detail. When he died, I was 26. There were people who expected the structure to collapse, but it didn't. No. He looked at his hands. I made choices. Some of them I would make again. Some I have tried to undo, with varying success. The world doesn't clean easily. He paused. There are things I control and things I'm responsible for that operate outside the law. I won't pretend otherwise. There are men who work for me who are dangerous. There is money that comes from places that are not clean. There have been confrontations. He looked up. I have never hurt anyone who was not a threat to someone I was responsible for. Valentina sat with this. Have you hurt anyone? Yes. Killed anyone? A long pause. Yes. She held his gaze. This was the moment she had known would come, had been building toward, had kept herself slightly in reserve for. This was the truth he had said he would not sanitize. She could feel her own heartbeat. Did they deserve it? She said. The question came out differently than she expected, not as a moral judgment, but as a genuine inquiry. He looked at her with something that was almost surprise. That's what you ask? It's what I need to know. He considered this. By my moral calculus, yes. By the law, no. By God's, he paused. I don't know what God thinks of me. I expect I'll find out eventually. She was quiet. Outside, the October wind moved around the house with the specific persistence of Sardinian weather. I'm not asking you to excuse it, he said. I'm not asking you to find it acceptable. I'm telling you because you asked, and because I said I would, and because... He stopped. Then, because I find that I care more about your actual knowledge of me than your good opinion, which is new. You care about my good opinion, she said. Yes, but not more than the truth. He looked at her steadily. Can you sit with that?
All of it?
She took a breath. She thought about all the things she had known and suspected, sitting alongside all the things she had observed directly. His care for Lucia, for Alessia, the schools, the vineyard, and the specific reverence with which he touched the things his father had made well. The way he spoke about his people, his responsibility, the patience, the honesty. She thought about the fact that the world was not clean, and that most people who knew it was not pretended otherwise, and that this man had not pretended. "I'm sitting with it now," she said. "I'll tell you when I'm done." He nodded. He sat back. He did not reach for her or ask for reassurance. They sat in the October room with the sea wind at the windows until Dante arrived and broke the silence, and neither of them acknowledged what had happened in it, but both of them carried it forward. She told him she was done sitting with it on a Thursday in November. She called him. She called him on his direct number, which she had had for months and used primarily for clinical coordination. And she said, "I've thought about what you told me." "I know," he said. "You've been thinking for 3 weeks. Have you been counting?" "Yes." She held the phone. In her apartment in Cagliari, with the November sea visible from her kitchen window and Caligula asleep on the radiator like an expensive throw pillow. "I'm not asking you to be something else," she said. "I'm not going to pretend the world you live in is safe or clean. I'm not going to tell you it's fine. I know. But I'm also not going to pretend I haven't been—" She stopped. This was the hard part. She was articulate and precise about most things. This was harder. That this hasn't become something I think about extensively. A pause. "Valentina, I'm telling you I'm not running," she said. "That's the thing I'm telling you." The quality of the silence that followed was different from any of his silences before. It had the specific weight of something being put down, carefully, with full attention. "I'm in Cagliari," he said. "What?" "I'm in the city. I came for a meeting this morning. I'm at the penthouse on Via Roma." A pause. "Can I come to you?" She looked at her apartment, at Caligula on the radiator, at the books piled on the coffee table and the half-eaten plate of something on the kitchen counter, at the ordinary human reality of her actual domestic existence. "Yes," she said, "but it's not fancy here." "I'm not looking for fancy," he said. He arrived 30 minutes later, which meant he'd been close. He came to the door in a jacket and no tie, and she thought, briefly, privately, that he looked like something out of the kind of film she would never admit to watching. The specific, devastating quality of him slightly amplified by the dark jacket against the cold. She had not changed. She was in jeans and a sweater, and her hair was tied back in the way she wore it at home. And his expression when he saw her confirmed something she had been privately uncertain about. "Come in," she said. He came in and looked at her apartment with the same quality of attention he brought to everything, not assessing its value, but reading it the way you read a text. The books. The large corkboard in the hall, covered in case notes and professional reminders, and one photograph of her mother. The cat, who opened one eye and decided Marco Valenti did not warrant moving for. "He's judging me," Marco said. "He judges everyone. He was named for a reason." She went to the kitchen. "Tea? Or something stronger?" "Tea is fine." She made it and brought it, and they sat on her small sofa. Her apartment was not large, and the sofa was the kind that made proximity unavoidable rather than chosen. With the November sea outside the window, and the silence was the most comfortable silence they had yet had together, which she thought said something. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Ask." "What do you need from me, specifically?" He looked at her. "Not romantically, practically. What would it take for you to trust this enough to let it be real?" She looked at him for a long moment. "You keep asking me questions that require an answer I've been thinking about for a while. Because I know you think carefully, and your careful answers are the ones I want." She turned her teacup in her hands. Honesty, she said. Always. Even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. She paused. I don't need your world to be safe. I need to know what I'm actually in. You'll have it. I need to be able to say no. To anything. You've been saying no to things for months, he said. And nothing has changed. That's already established. She looked at him. And I need... She stopped. This was the hardest one. I need to matter. Not as a possession. Not as something to be kept or protected because you've decided I belong to you. I need to matter as a person who is here because she chose to be. He was very still. I know the difference, he said quietly, between a woman who is there because she has no alternative and one who is there because she wants to be. I have spent my life surrounded by the first kind. I am aware, his voice changed very slightly. I am acutely aware of how different you are. Valentina set down her tea. She leaned forward and kissed him. Not tentatively, not with the specific caution of a person hedging against consequence. She kissed him the way she had been thinking about kissing him for 3 months, with her full attention, and his response, immediate, complete, and controlled in a way that was somehow more devastating than the loss of control would have been, told her everything she needed to know about his patience and what it had cost him. When they separated, he rested his forehead against hers. His hands were at her face. He was breathing slightly harder than usual. Valentina, he said. Marco. I've been... He stopped. She felt him searching for words, which was unusual. I've been waiting for you to decide, for longer than I've waited for anything, and I'm extremely patient. I know, she said. I need you to understand. He pulled back enough to look at her. His eyes were dark and absolutely present. What this is to me. What you are. Tell me, she said. I don't have the right language for it yet, he said. But I will. I have time. She looked at him. At the man who had come barefoot to a door at 2 a.m. and brought her water without being asked, and waited for her to decide. You have time, she agreed. December arrived, and with it, something she had not anticipated. His name was Riccardo Fabri. He was 45 years old, he was from Naples, and he arrived in Sardinia in the 2nd week of December, like a weather system that everyone had noticed on the forecast and hoped would track differently. He was, as far as she could gather from Lucia's careful, not-quite explanations, and Dante's quieter-than-usual demeanor, a man with whom Marco had a history that predated the current shape of his business operations, a man who had been, at some point, an ally, and who was now something else. She knew this because Marco told her. He had kept his word about honesty. Not in exhaustive detail, there were operational things he protected her from by design, and she respected the design, but in shape and direction. When something important was happening in the world around him, he told her the outline. Fabri was the outline. He wants a meeting, Marco said. They were in the northern house. The olive trees outside were winter bare, and the sea had gone gray, and the quality of the air had the specific tension she now recognized as the feeling of his world when it was turning. About? Consolidation. He said the word with a flatness that contained dislike. He has been buying influence in shipping routes I control. He wants to formalize an arrangement. He paused. I don't want to formalize an arrangement. Then don't. It's not entirely simple. He looked at the window. He has information about a period of our operations 5 years ago that he could use in ways that would be inconvenient. Leverage. She understood what that meant without him having to elaborate. What kind of inconvenient? Legal. He looked at her. Nothing that would... He stopped. It would be managed, but it would be costly and disruptive, and it would require attention I would rather give elsewhere. He paused. He knows this. She absorbed this. Where does it leave you? negotiating from a position I don't like. He said this without drama, as a man acknowledged an inconvenient reality. I know how to do it. I've done it before. But Fabry is... He paused. He's the kind of man who enjoys having something over people, who takes pleasure in the position rather than the outcome. He sounds like someone who had a difficult childhood, she said. Marco looked at her. That's not sympathy, she said. That's just... When people need power that badly, it usually starts early. You extend understanding to everyone, he said. Not a criticism, a kind of wondering. It doesn't mean I excuse anything, she said. I just like to know why. He was quiet for a moment. There's something else, he said. Tell me. Fabry knows about you. He said it without prelude. He has people who gather information. He knows you've been here. He knows what... A pause. The shape of what this is. The room was quiet. She held this information and felt its weight. Is that a threat? She said. It's not an active threat. It's a card. He looked at her directly. I'm telling you because you need to know. And because I'm taking steps. You won't be unguarded. You won't even know... He stopped. Marco, she said, I don't want to be guarded without knowing. He looked at her. All right, he said. A man named Enzo will be nearby. He drives a gray Alpha. He won't approach you unless something requires it. She thought about this, about the specific reality of what it meant to be in the life of a man like Marco, the way security and danger were the same side of the same coin. Fine, she said. You're not alarmed, he said. I am alarmed, she said honestly. I'm also not going to pretend I didn't know this world existed when I chose to be in it. He stood up and came to her. He stood close, not touching her, the specific quality of his presence that was itself a kind of contact. Nothing is going to happen to you, he said. You can't promise that. No, he said, but I can make it very unlikely. He paused. And I will. She looked up at him. I know, she said. I know you will. The meeting with Fabry was arranged for mid-December in Cagliari at a hotel. Valentina was not involved. She went about her work, her patients, her Tuesday visits, the December rhythm of the island, and the gray Alpha appeared peripherally in her days without intruding, and she adjusted to it with a practicality that would have surprised her former self. What she did not anticipate was running into Fabry directly. It was a Thursday. She was coming out of a coffee bar near the port, late afternoon, and a man stepped into her path with the deliberateness of someone who had been waiting. He was as she had imagined him, well-dressed, soft-looking in the way of a man who had never done physical work, with eyes that were quick and assessing and not kind. He smiled. Dr. Greco, he said, what a small island. She looked at him. She had 9 years of clinical experience in situations that required steady nerves and no visible fear, and she drew on all of it. I don't believe we've met, she said. Riccardo Fabry. He extended a hand she did not take. I'm an acquaintance of Marco Valenti's. Then you should call his office. She moved to step past him. I admire your work, he said to her back. She stopped. Not from fear, from the specific instinct of not showing him a retreat. The birth this past July, quite remarkable from what I understand. She turned. She looked at him with the absolute calm of someone who has decided in a split second exactly how to be. I do my job, she said. I don't discuss patients. Good afternoon. She walked away. Her hands were steady. Her face was steady. She was aware of Enzo's gray Alpha across the street, and she did not look toward it. She called Marco from her car. Fabry approached me, she said, near the port, 40 minutes ago. The pause that followed was the kind that told her more than words would have. Are you safe? He said. Completely. He was social, not threatening. He wanted me to know he knows who I am. She paused. Which I imagine you've already heard. Enzo called 2 minutes ago. Another pause. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. This is part of what I agreed to. She started her car. But you should know, he wants you to react. He wants you to make a move, because of me. A silence. You understand this world better than I expected, he said. I understand people, she said. That's most of it. The Fabri situation resolved in a way Valentina was never entirely given the details of, which she accepted as one of the specific topographies of her life now. Marco met with him twice in December and called her after the second meeting with the particular quality in his voice that she had learned to identify as the relief of a man who had managed something without having to resort to the things he would prefer not to resort to. It's handled, he said. How? Expensively, he said, and boringly. She laughed, and the sound of it on the phone seemed to do something to him. I want you and Cagliari for Christmas, he said, at the penthouse. Lucia and Dante will be there. My mother. She paused. Your mother. She wants to meet you. Why does she want to meet me? Because Lucia talks about you. Because Dante talks about you. Because... He paused. Because I've spoken to her about you. Valentina held the phone. What did you say? That I'd found someone I didn't want to lose. He said it simply, without preamble, the way he said things that cost him to say. She drew conclusions. Are they accurate conclusions? Probably. She thought about Christmas, and about the specific significance of meeting his mother, the gravity of that, in the context of who he was and what his family meant. All right, she said. His mother was Giulia, which was also the name of the housekeeper at the northern estate, which briefly confused Valentina. But Marco's mother, Giulia Valenti, née Conti, was a woman of 64, with iron-gray hair and the specific authority of a woman who had raised her son to be something formidable, and who looked at Valentina, across a Christmas table laden with the specific excess of a Sardinian feast, with an expression of thorough, unhurried assessment. You're the midwife, she said. I'm a midwife, Valentina said. Among other things. Among other things, the older woman repeated. Her Italian was Cagliaritan, broadened by decades. What other things? A person, Valentina said. Mostly. Giulia Valenti looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at Marco, who was watching this exchange from the end of the table with the expression of a man who has placed something valuable on a table and is watching the adjudication with absolute stillness. Then she looked back at Valentina. Good, she said. My son needs someone who is a person. He has spent too long surrounded by people who are only what they're useful for. She reached for the bread. Eat. You look like you work too much. I do work too much, Valentina said. So does he. You'll be terrible for each other's schedules. She said this with the satisfaction of someone delivering welcome news. More wine? Marco, at the end of the table, closed his eyes for exactly 1 moment. Lucia, beside Valentina, was trying very hard not to make a sound. The dinner went 3 hours, the way Sardinian Christmas dinners did, with the table accumulating dishes and bottles and conversation and the specific accumulated heat of people who knew each other and were comfortable together. Dante told the story about the bridge project in Calabria that involved a misunderstanding with local contractors and a goat, which Valentina had heard before and which was better the second time. Giulia Valenti told a story about Marco at 14 that Marco attempted to redirect with a calm persistence that simply bounced off his mother's absolute narrative determination. Valentina watched him navigate his mother with the specific fondness of a man who had been thoroughly outwitted his entire life by one particular person and had made his peace with it. She found his foot under the table. He went very still. Then, without looking at her, with perfect composure, he put his hand on the table and curled his fingers around her hand, which she had rested there, hidden by the tablecloth, present. They remained like that for the rest of the dinner. Later, When Lucia and Dante had taken Alessia home and his mother had retired and the kitchen had been restored to order, they stood on the penthouse terrace above the lights of Cagliari, with the winter sea below and the Christmas cold moving between them. "She likes you," he said. "She was testing me." "She was." He looked at the city. "She tests everyone I care about. She tested Lucia the same way." He paused. "She has not looked at anyone the way she looked at you." "How did she look at me?" He turned. In the terrace light, he was very close, and she was looking up at him, and his expression had the quality she had learned to read, the specific, unguarded openness that happened at the end of very long days. "Like she recognized something," he said. She looked at him. "What did she recognize?" "I don't know," he said. "She wouldn't tell me. She said it wasn't for her to say." Valentina thought about this, about the silver-haired woman with the iron assessment and the warm table, and the way she had watched her son watching Valentina. "She saw that you're serious about this," Valentina said. "Is that what it was?" "She was checking if I was serious back." She looked at the city below, the lights, the dark suggestion of the sea. I think she got her answer. He said nothing for a moment. Then, "Are you?" She turned to face him. "I'm here," she said, "in December, at a Christmas dinner where your mother assessed me like a structural engineer reviewing load-bearing calculations." She held his gaze. "I'm serious." He brought his hand to her face, his palm against her cheek, and she leaned into it with the specific relief of someone setting down something they've been carrying for a long time. "Stay tonight," he said. "Yes," she said. January is the month of reckoning on islands. The tourists have gone. The summer warmth is a memory. The island becomes itself again, stark and beautiful and honest in the way things were honest when they had nothing to sell. Valentina had been staying at the penthouse with increasing frequency through December and now into January, moving between her apartment and his world with a fluidity that she was still adjusting to, still learning the specific weight and texture of. Her apartment remained hers. She was very clear about this, in her own mind, in the arrangement they had never explicitly named. Her cat, her books, her patients, her work. She had not become a fixture in his life. She had become a presence in it, which was different. He understood the difference. She was increasingly certain of this. It was the 15th of January when Enzo called Marco while they were eating dinner in the penthouse kitchen. Marco answered, listened, and his expression changed in the specific way she had learned to read. Not fear, not alarm, but the tightening quality of a man shifting from one mode to another. He said 3 words. He ended the call. "What?" she said. "Fabry," he said. "The deal we made in December. He's moving against it." He stood. "He's made a claim to authorities on the mainland. Fictional, but documented. It will require a response." "What kind of response?" "Legal first, then—" He looked at her. "I need to go to the mainland tomorrow." "All right." "I don't know how long." He was already thinking, she could see it, the particular distant focus of a man triaging. "I want you to stay at the North House, not here." She set down her fork. "Why?" "Because if Fabry is moving, he may escalate the personal element. As leverage." He looked at her. "The North House is controlled. This apartment," he looked around, "this is more visible." She considered this. "I'm not going to stop working because of Riccardo Fabry." "I'm not asking you to stop working. I'm asking you to change where you sleep." He held her gaze. "Please." The please was not something he used often. She had noticed this early. He made requests, he made arrangements, he offered options. But please was reserved for something he actually needed. "All right," she said. "The North House, but I keep my schedule." "Of course." He left the next morning at 5, and she went with him to the door, and he stood for a moment, looking at her with the specific expression she had been trying to name for months. "I don't like leaving," he said. "I know. I am aware of how that sounds. It sounds like someone who spent his whole life being responsible for everything and is now responsible for something that isn't a business asset," she said. "It sounds uncomfortable." He looked at her. "That's very accurate." "I know you," she said. Something vast moved across his expression. Then he kissed her, once, with the focused intensity that was his specific version of how to want something completely, and left. 3 days into her stay at the North House, with Julia cooking and the January sea beating at the windows and Enzo's gray Alpha in the courtyard, Valentina received a call from a number she didn't recognize. She answered. There was a male voice, mainland accent, that said her name. "Fabri sent me," the voice said. "He wants you to know that Marco's situation on the mainland is more serious than he's told you, that there are things being prepared, and that—" a pause, "and that he values your safety and hopes you'll make decisions accordingly." She recognized the technique immediately. Sow uncertainty. Make her doubt. Make her afraid. Make her ask questions. Apply pressure. Become a liability. "Tell him I received the message," she said calmly. "Tell him I'm a midwife. I work with people in difficult, high-pressure situations. It doesn't make me easy to frighten." She paused. "And tell him that I find his approach quite transparent." She ended the call. Then she called Marco. He answered in one ring. She told him, concisely, exactly what had happened. There was a silence. "You didn't react," he said. "Of course not." Another silence. "He expected you to panic, to call me in distress, to create a pressure point." "I know." She looked out the window at the winter sea. "Marco, I need to know. Is the situation actually serious? Not what he said. What's true?" "It's being handled," he said. "The legal exposure is real, but manageable. I have people." A pause. "Are you all right?" "I'm completely fine," she said. "I'm slightly irritated at Fabri's predictability." He made a sound that was, she thought, the closest he came to laughing aloud. "You're extraordinary," he said. "I'm practical," she said. "Keep me informed. Don't manage me." "Yes," he said. "I know." He came back on a Friday. She did not know he was coming. He had said, perhaps the following week, and she was in the kitchen at the North House at 9 in the evening, sitting across from Julia, the housekeeper, not the mother, with a glass of wine and a book, when she heard his car in the courtyard. She knew it was him before she heard the door. She had learned the specific quality of his arrivals, the way the house registered them. He came into the kitchen and stopped when he saw her. He looked like someone who had been through something expensive and complex and had come out the other side. His jacket was somewhere else. His shirt was rumpled in the way of a man who had been wearing it for too many hours. He looked tired, in the way that was different from his usual self-possessed quality, an authentic tiredness, the kind that sat in the eyes. Julia looked at him, assessed the situation, topped up Valentina's wine and added a second glass, and left. He sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "It's resolved," he said. "How?" "Fabri withdrew the claim. He'll be—" He paused. "He'll be moving his operations to the mainland, permanently. We've reached an understanding." She did not ask the cost of this understanding. She held his gaze and saw in it the specific shadow of the things he had had to do and would not tell her. And she sat with it as she had learned to sit with the things she would not be told. "You're back," she said. "I'm back. Are you all right?" He looked at her, the specific look, the one that was dark and complete and had no performance in it. "Better now," he said. "Come here," she said. He was still for a moment. The quality of stillness she had first noticed 8 months ago, in the entrance hall, barefoot, at 2 in the morning. Then he stood and came around the table, and she stood to meet him, and he held her, with the specific quality of a man who had been in the world and was grateful to come back to something real. He was not demonstrative. She had learned this about him. He showed love the way he showed everything, through attention and deliberateness rather than performance. But in this holding, there was something without reservation, and she let it matter. "I should have called more," he said. "You called every day." "I know. I still should have called more." He pulled back enough to look at her. "The call from Fabry's man. I'm sorry." "You have nothing to—" "I do," he said. "This is part of being with me. I know that. I'm sorry for the part that I can't change." She looked at him, at the tiredness and the relief and the specific quality of his face when he was without performance. "I knew what I was agreeing to," she said. "I'm not keeping a tally." "I am," he said quietly. She understood what he meant, the specific weight of owing someone something they had not chosen to carry. She understood it from her work, the debt that accumulated between people who moved through difficulty together, and how it could be either a wound or a bond. "Don't carry that," she said. "I'm not owed anything. I'm here because I chose to be." He looked at her for a long time. "I know," he said. "That's why it matters." They stayed in the kitchen for another hour, with the wine and the fire Julia had left built up in the sitting room next door and the January wind outside. She told him about the week. Lucia, Alessia's first laugh, which had apparently occurred on Tuesday and been witnessed by Dante with the expression of a man who was revising every prior understanding he had about the universe. Marco listened with the complete attention he brought to everything she said. She thought, as she often did at these moments, about the specific paradox of him, the weight of everything he carried, the specific cost of his world, and the quality of attention he gave to the things he loved. The two were not contradictory. They were related. He cared for things the way he managed threats, thoroughly, specifically, without performance, without rest. "My mother called," he said. "What did she say?" "She asked if I'd asked you yet." Valentina paused. "Asked me what?" He looked at her with the careful, still expression that told her he was about to say something that cost him something. "To stay," he said. "Not as a visiting arrangement. To stay." She was very quiet. "That's not a small thing," she said. "No," he said. "It's not. I know what you need. Your apartment, your work, your independence in every sense. I'm not asking you to fold yourself into my world. I'm asking you to—" He paused, choosing precisely. "Stake a claim here, if you want to." She looked at him for a long time. Outside, the January sea moved against the island in the dark, and the fire in the next room made its small sounds, and Caligula, who had been brought north at her insistence, and who had established immediate dominance over the entire household, including, she was fairly certain, Enzo, was asleep somewhere with the regal indifference of a cat who had always known the world would reorganize itself around him. "I'll think about it," she said. "I know you will," he said. He reached across the table and took her hand. "Take your time." February on the island was the storm month. Not every year, but often enough that the locals had a specific posture toward February, a watchfulness, an expectation of disruption. The sea did what it did, and the wind did what it did. And the island was reminded that it was, at the bottom of everything, a rock in a large body of water that had not asked for its presence. The storm came on the second Tuesday of February with the specific severity of something that had been building in the Atlantic for a week, and it hit Sardinia in the hours before dawn with the concerted intention of rearrangement. The northern coast, exposed as it was, took it fully. She was at the North House when it came. This had become, quietly, the working arrangement. She kept the Cagliari apartment, kept her independence, but she was here more often than not, and Julia had started keeping a space in the pantry for the specific brand of coffee she preferred, which was, Valentina had decided, the most domestic evidence of change she would allow herself to notice. The storm knocked out the secondary power at 3 in the morning. The generators came on immediately. The house was well prepared, but the sound was different, lower, and she woke in the dark to the extraordinary noise of February hitting stone with everything it had. She found Marco already in the study, with a laptop and 2 phones, and the contained focus of a man managing something. He was, as it turned out, managing several things. A shipping operation delayed by the weather, a call from the mainland about the ongoing legal aftermath of the Fabry situation, and a problem with the vineyard's outbuildings, which had taken wind damage. She brought coffee. She sat in the other chair. She read, because there was nothing for her to do, and it was 3 in the morning, and being present without being in the way was its own form of support. He looked up at some point and saw her there, with her book, in the lamplight, and said nothing. He simply held the image of her for a moment, the way she had seen him hold other things he valued, with full attention, without rush. At dawn the storm had not abated, and Lucia appeared in the sitting room with Alessia and a haunted expression, and the 5 of them, 6 if you counted Caligula, who had established himself on the highest shelf in the study with the expression of someone waiting out a tactical situation, settled into the specific domestic intimacy of people riding out a storm together. Dante made bread because he could not do anything with his structural engineering expertise in this particular scenario and needed to be useful. Marco made phone calls. Lucia fed Alessia and told Valentina about a documentary she'd been watching about Byzantine architecture that she found inexplicably soothing. Julia moved through all of it in her orbital way, appearing with food and warmth at exactly the moments they were needed. By midday, the wind had reduced to something livable, and in the afternoon, Valentina and Marco walked the grounds. The damage was not extensive. A section of wall on the lower terrace, some tree limbs down, one of the outbuildings had lost part of a roof. Marco walked it methodically, noting, already calculating. She walked beside him and watched the island rebuild its stillness in the storm's aftermath. The specific quality of air after great weather has passed through, washed and cold and honest. "Tell me something," she said. "Ask." If none of this existed, she gestured, a small motion that encompassed everything, the house, the security, the implications. If you were just a man, what would you be? He was quiet as they walked along the lower terrace wall, stepping over a fallen branch. Then, I don't know how to answer that honestly. I was never going to be just a man. He looked at the sea, which was still agitated, still gray, still moving with the storm's memory. I used to think that was a loss, that there was some other version of me that had been taken. He paused. I don't think that anymore. Why not? Because the version of me that exists made choices, he said. I didn't inherit this without agency. Every decision, even the ones I was shaped toward, was still mine. He looked at her. Including you. I'm a decision, she said. You're the decision, he said. Everything else I've decided was inevitable in some form. You are the only thing I chose that was entirely new. She looked at him, walking beside her in the February post-storm landscape, the gray sky opening slightly to the west. Marco, she said. Valentina. I'll stay, she said. He stopped walking. She turned to face him. Not because of the storm, not because of anything that happened this winter, because I've been thinking about it since November, and I know my own mind. She held his gaze. I want to be here. He looked at her with an expression that was not what she expected. Not relief, not triumph, not the satisfaction of an outcome achieved. It was simpler and more fundamental than any of those things. Say it again, he said. She looked at him. I want to be here, she said. With you. He closed the distance between them and held her face in both hands and kissed her with the specific intensity of a man who had been patient for a very long time and was no longer required to be. When they came apart, the western sky was clearing. The sea was still moving, but differently, with the honest restlessness of something that had done its work and returned to its ordinary nature. "Your apartment," he said. "Still mine. The cat. Mine. Absolutely mine. The Tuesday visits? Will continue forever," she said. "Alessia is going to have the most comprehensively monitored developmental history of any child in Sardinia." He looked at her with the expression she now had a word for, finally, the one she'd been searching for since the first night. Adoration. Contained, specific, absolute. "Yes," he said. "She will." Spring came to the island the way it always did, not gently, not gradually, but with the specific Sardinian suddenness of things that had been waiting and then simply arrived. The maquis turned green overnight. The almond trees blossomed. The sea changed color from winter pewter to the beginning of its summer blue. Valentina's life had changed shape, not visibly to most people who knew her. She had the same apartment, the same patience, the same working practice. Sarah, who knew her best, noticed but said nothing for 3 weeks before finally, over wine on a Tuesday evening in Cagliari, saying, "You're different." "How?" Valentina said. "Quieter," Sarah considered. "Not sad quieter, more," she searched, "inhabited, like someone who has put down something heavy they were carrying without knowing it." Valentina thought about this. "I suppose I am," she said. "Is it him?" "Partly." She turned her glass. "Partly me. I think I'd been holding myself in reserve for a long time, waiting for the right conditions." "For what?" "For anything." She looked at the window, at the March night beyond it. "For something to be worth the risk." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "And is it? Worth it?" Valentina thought about Marco, about the specific weight of his attention, the honesty he had kept in every condition, the patience, about the things she had learned to carry, the gray alpha, the mainland trips, the specific quality of tension when something in his world was in motion, about the way he set down his phone when she walked into a room, the way he remembered everything she had ever told him, the way he held her at night with the complete attention of a man who did not sleep lightly and had decided she was worth whatever sleeplessness the vigilance cost him. "Yes," she said simply. Spring also brought Marco's birthday, which she learned about from Lucia, who told her as though sharing intelligence. "He doesn't celebrate it," Lucia said. "He never has. His father didn't believe in any of that, really. Celebration." She paused. "But he should." "What is he like?" Valentina asked. "You," Lucia said immediately. "Besides me." Lucia thought. "The vineyard. Wine, but you know that. Books. He reads more than anyone I've ever known, and he doesn't talk about it. He likes—" She stopped. "He likes the olive oil from here. The specific kind Antonio presses at the end of October. He always has a bottle of it." She paused. "He likes the mornings. He gets up before anyone else and just sits in the study. He says it's when he thinks clearly." Valentina thought about this. On the morning of his birthday, the 1st of April, a birth date she found faintly and appropriately ironic, she was already there, already awake at 6, already in the study when he came in at 6:15, in the specific, quiet way of a man who expected to be alone. He stopped in the doorway. On the desk, coffee, already made. The April edition of the book she knew he was reading, which he had left on the nightstand with a note in it. She had found the note and replaced it with one of her own. A small bottle of Antonio's October olive oil, which she had obtained from Antonio directly by the simple method of asking. And a card which said in her handwriting, "You've been patient for a very long time. You should know it was worth it, from the other side too." He stood in the doorway and read the card and looked at what she'd put on the desk and was silent for a long time. Then he sat down in his chair and looked at her across the desk and said, "You talked to Antonio." "He was very willing," she said. "He told me 3 stories about you as a boy that I'm saving for strategic deployment." "What stories?" "That information is classified." He looked at her. In the April morning light, with the island outside beginning its spring, the specific quality of his expression was the one she had been cataloging since July, the one she had learned all the dimensions of. But this morning it had an additional element, a softness she had seen rarely, the specific quality of a man who had not expected to receive something and was recalibrating. "Happy birthday," she said. "Valentina," he said. "Marco." He stopped. He looked at the card in his hand. "I don't—" She waited. "I'm not good at receiving things," he said, finally. "I know." She held his gaze. "You're doing fine." He stood up and came around the desk, and when he held her this time, she felt something he had not given her before. Not the controlled intensity, not the careful patience. Something uncontrolled, something that had slipped its management. "I love you," he said, against her hair. Quietly, with the specific quality of something said for the first time, the specific gravity of a word that a person had been carrying for a long time and had finally found the exact right moment for. She held on to him. She felt the reality of it, all of it, the stone house and the gray Alpha and the birth in July and all the Tuesday drives and the conversations and the specific shape of this life she had chosen. "I know," she said. "I've known for a while." He pulled back to look at her. "And?" he said. "And I love you," she said. "I've been waiting for you to go first." He looked at her for a moment, the dark, complete, absolute gaze, and then something shifted in his expression that was new, that was the final layer of something very old and carefully held, releasing. He kissed her in the April morning with the specific feeling of a thing that had been waiting to be exactly this, and finally was. The summer came again, and the island was loud with it. A year had passed since the night of the rain. Valentina stood on the terrace of the North House in the early morning of a July day that was going to be very hot, with coffee in both hands and the sea below going from gray to blue in the specific way it did at this hour, and thought about the year. She was thinking about trust. Not because anything had happened to threaten it, but because she was a person who thought carefully about the things she relied on, the way she thought carefully about the conditions of a birth, the factors, the variables, what could be counted on, and what required vigilance. She had trusted Marco with her presence, with her knowledge of him, with the soft places in herself she had kept in reserve. And he had held these things with the same quality he held everything, completely, without performance, without casualness. But there was something she had not yet offered. She had been thinking about it since February, since the storm, since the morning in April when he'd said the words that changed the arrangement of things between them. She had been thinking about the specific piece of herself she most protected, not from fear of Marco, but from the long habit of a woman who had built a life on self-sufficiency, and who was still, beneath the love, cautious about the terms of her own need. She needed to tell him about Florence. Not the training. He knew the training. He knew the professional history. He knew Florence as the city where she had learned her work, which was true, but not complete. Florence was also the city where she had been 24 and in love with a man who had been brilliant and cruel in the specific way of someone who understood how to read people well enough to find the exact place where pressure caused the most damage. She had spent 2 years rebuilding something she hadn't fully understood she'd broken, and she had never talked about it to anyone except Sarah, and she had built her self-sufficiency on top of it, like a foundation that was mostly sound, but had one place where the load-bearing was uneven. She heard him behind her, his footfall on the terrace. He came to stand beside her, and he brought his own coffee, and he stood looking at the sea in the morning, the way they both did, in the specific, comfortable silence of two people who had learned each other's preferred quality of mourning. "I want to tell you something," she said. He looked at her. No urgency, no alarm, simply attention. She told him about Florence, about the man. His name was Eduardo, and he had been 32 to her 24, and he had known exactly how to make her feel found, and then known exactly how to use that. She told it cleanly, without drama, with the clinical precision she brought to difficult things, and she watched Marco's face as she did. His expression did not change in the ways she had feared it might. It did not tighten with judgment, did not perform sympathy, did not offer the specific, clumsy comfort of someone trying to fill space. It did what Marco's face did when he was receiving something important. It went very still, very present, giving the thing she was saying the full weight of his attention. When she was done, they were quiet for a moment. "He's not in your life now," he said, not a question. "No, I left. He didn't make it easy. I left anyway." "Good," he said simply. "I wanted you to know because—" She paused. "Because I've been protecting a part of myself from you that wasn't protection from you specifically. It was a reflex." She held his gaze. "I don't want reflexes between us." He was quiet for a moment. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For trusting me with it." He set down his coffee. "I want to tell you something in return." She waited. "I've been afraid," he said. The word sat strangely on him. She could see it, the slight effort of saying something that a man of his particular formation did not easily say. "Not of my world, not of the things in it. Of this." He gestured, the small motion between them. "Of something mattering this much. Of the specific vulnerability of it." "I know," she said. "I've been—" He paused. "I've been aware, since almost the beginning, that you could leave. That your presence in my life was your choice and could be unmade. And I've been careful, managing, trying to be worth the choice without—" He stopped. "Without asking too much," she said. "Yes." "Marco," she turned to face him, "I'm not here because I'm managing the risk of you. I'm here because I want to be here. That's not conditional on you being perfectly worth it all the time." He looked at her, something vast and still. "I know that," he said, intellectually. "Say it again," she said. His own words, from October. Something moved in his expression, the specific quality she loved, the rare, genuine surprise of him. "I know that you're here because you want to be," he said, "not because I've earned it sufficiently." "Correct." She held his gaze. "I earn it too. This is mutual." He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said. She picked up her coffee. The sea had completed its transition from gray to blue, and the first of the summer's real heat was in the air, and the terrace was bright. "I was thinking," she said, "about Alessia's first birthday. In 6 weeks. Lucia wants something significant." "I know. She's already made 3 lists. She showed me list number 2. Valentina looked at the sea. "The vineyard might be a good setting. The terrace." He was quiet for a moment. "I was going to suggest the same thing." "We had the same idea." "We had the same idea," he confirmed. There was something in the way he said it. Quiet satisfaction. The specific warmth of two people discovering, again, the depth of their attunement. She looked at him sideways. He was looking at the sea. "We make a good pair," she said. "Yes," he said. "We do." On the first anniversary of the birth, which was to say, on the first anniversary of the night that had begun everything, Valentina stood in the courtyard of the North House at 2 a.m. because she could not sleep. And she looked up at the sky, and the sky was clear. No rain. The stars were out in the specific abundance they had on this island away from the city, and the air was warm with high July, and somewhere inside the house, Alessia was sleeping through her first birthday eve with the profound indifference of a 1-year-old. She heard the door open behind her. Marco came out in the same white linen shirt and bare feet as the first night. She had told him once that she remembered that detail specifically, the bare feet, the rolled sleeves, and he had looked at her with the expression she now knew was his version of being moved, and said nothing. She had not told him she thought about it still. He stood beside her and looked at the stars. "You're thinking about last year," he said. "Yes. So am I." She turned to look at him in the starlight. The year had not changed him in any way she could name, and yet she knew him so differently, knew the weight of him, the specific heat of his body beside hers at night, the quality of his voice in the mornings, the way he worried about Lucia and Alessia without ever performing the worry, the way he moved through his world with the authority of a man who had made his peace with what he was and was trying to make it something worth being. "I want to ask you something," he said. She waited. "I've been—" He paused. He turned from the stars to look at her, and in the darkness, his expression was the one she had catalogued since July last year, the one she had found words for in April, the one that was simply him looking at her and making no attempt to be anything other than what he was. From his pocket he took something small. She looked at it, a ring. Old, she thought. Not old as in antique, old as in actually worn, actually carried through years. The stone was dark red, a garnet, set in gold that had the warm texture of age. "This was my grandmother's," he said, "Alessia's namesake. My mother gave it to me in December." He paused. "She said she'd been keeping it for someone who deserved it." Valentina looked at the ring and then at him. "Marco," she said. "I'm not asking you to change anything," he said. "Not your apartment, not your work, not any term of your life you've built. I'm asking you to—" He stopped, found the right word. "Stake a further claim, if you want to." She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the rain, the call at 2 a.m, the entrance hall and the bare feet and the quality of attention that had arrested her from the first moment. She thought about the vineyard in August and the breakfast the next morning and the terrace in November and the Christmas table and the February storm and the April morning and the year of choosing and being chosen. She thought about trust, about the specific weight of what he was offering. Not safety, not certainty, not the absence of difficulty, but truth. The specific quality of being known completely and wanted anyway. "Yes," she said. He slid the ring onto her finger and held her hand and looked at it for a moment, and she looked at it with him, and the night was warm and enormous, and the stars were extraordinary in the way the stars were on this island. And she heard from somewhere inside the house the small sound of Alessia, not crying, just present, just announcing her existence to the dark. "She knows," Valentina said. "She's perceptive," Marco said. "Her mother is too. Her father is also not unaware." "No," he said, "he is not." He held her hand, and she leaned against him, and the island was dark and quiet around them, and everything that had happened in a year, all of it, the rain and the fear and the birth and the long, slow accumulation of knowing each other, sat between them in the July night with the specific weight of things that were real and chosen and intended to last. "Last year," she said, "I almost didn't answer the phone." "But you did," he said. "I did." "Why?" She thought about it. "Because Lucia needed me," she said. "And because something in the way you spoke told me—" "What?" She turned to look at him. "That you were a man who did not call lightly." He looked at her in the dark. "No," he said, "I don't." She lifted her face and kissed him, and he held her with the completeness she had come to know and rely on. And overhead, the Sardinian stars continued their long, indifferent turning, and on the island where she had been born, and from which she had left, and to which she had returned, The year closed its circle. The 2nd July. The light on the island was the specific light of high summer, generous, horizontal in the evenings, capable of making ordinary things look like paintings. The vineyard was heavy with the beginning of ripeness. The North Coast house had the particular quality it got in July, when the days were long and the sea was blue, and the summer made its case for being the best thing there was. Valentina had been doing a birth when he called. This was a thing about her life that had not changed and would not change. Births did not wait for personal circumstances, for anniversaries, for the particular logistics of a life that had grown complicated and full. Births arrived on their own schedule, with the absolute authority of the inevitable. And when they did, she was there. This one was in Oristano, a first-time mother who had been her patient for 7 months, a young woman named Federica, who had done everything right and worried about everything possible, and who was, at 3 p.m. on a July Tuesday, finally meeting her son. Valentina worked with the calm and presence that 9 years of practice had built into her body, and the boy arrived with the specific, indignant clarity of someone who had been waiting and did not appreciate the delay. She called Marco from the car afterward, the way she always did after births that required full concentration. "Good?" he said. "Perfect," she said. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. His name is Matteo. Every year you tell me these details. And every year you remember them. Yes, he said. I do. She drove north through the afternoon island, through the interior roads that she knew now by their specific curves and gradients and the quality of light they held at different hours. And she thought about Federica's expression when they placed Matteo in her arms. The specific involuntary expansion that Valentina had never found the right word for, the one that happened at every birth, in every circumstance, without exception. The moment when a person became a different person than they had been a minute before. She thought about being made different by things, about the specific architecture of change. The North House was full when she arrived. Lucia and Dante and Alessia, who was 14 months old and had recently discovered walking with the focused determination of someone who had been planning this for some time and had no patience for obstacles. Marco's mother, who had come for a week, and who had spent most of it in robust argument with Julia about the correct preparation of certain regional dishes, both of them clearly enjoying it enormously. Enzo, who was in the courtyard doing whatever Enzo did, and who had told Valentina twice that Caligula was the finest cat he had ever encountered, which she appreciated on the cat's behalf. Caligula himself was on the kitchen table, which was against every rule anyone had ever attempted to establish, and which he ignored with the serene certainty of an animal who had assessed the political landscape and determined that the rules did not apply to him. She came through the door, and the specific noise and warmth of the house received her. Alessia reached for her immediately, making the specific sound she made for the people she had decided were hers. "There she is," Valentina said, picking her up, holding the small, serious, heavy weight of her. Marco's mother looked up from the kitchen table. "You were at a birth," she said, not a question. "Oristano, first-time mother, boy. Good? Perfect." She held Alessia, who was already losing interest and reaching for the window. "Where is he?" "Study," Julia's mother said, with the tone of someone reporting on a natural phenomenon. He was in the study, at the desk, reading. The actual reading. The specific quality of his attention when something had it fully. And he looked up when she came in, and the expression that moved across his face was the one she still thought about cataloging, but no longer needed to. She knew what it was. She had always known. She had simply needed the year to have the language for it. "How was she?" he said. "Federica." She was everything she needed to be. Valentina sat in her chair. It had become her chair, in the way that things became one's own through repeated presence. "You spoke to your lawyer today." "How did you know?" "You have a particular quality after those calls." She held his gaze. "The incorporation?" "Moving forward, the new route will be clean by autumn." He looked at her. "The foundation in Orgosolo wants to build a secondary school. They need planning approvals. My mother will be unreasonable about this. Your mother is already involved. I spoke to her last week. Valentina looked at him. You called my mother. She called me. She had opinions. She always has opinions. She paused. How did she find your number? She asked Dante. He paused. She also told me that you have been difficult since you were 7 years old, and that she trusts me to manage. I'm not... I know, he said. She means it as a compliment. Valentina sat with this, with the specific, improbable reality of her mother and Marco Valenti on the phone together, discussing schools in Orgosolo. With the way her life had arranged itself around something she had not been looking for, in the specific way that things arrived on their own schedule with the absolute authority of the inevitable. I want to tell you something, she said. He set down his book. He gave her his full attention, the way he always did. I've been thinking about Federica today, she said. About all of them. All the births. The thing that happens when a person becomes someone they weren't an hour before. She held his gaze. I think I've been doing that since last July. Becoming someone I wasn't before. He was still. The study was quiet. Outside, the July evening was beginning, the light going golden and long, and through the window the olive trees were silver green and the sea was the color of deep water. So have I, he said quietly. She looked at him for a long moment, at the year's evidence, the patience, the truth, the specific cost and gift of being known. At the ring on her hand, warm from her own skin, carrying its history. The thing I've been trying to name, she said, since that first night. The way you looked at me in the entrance hall. What about it? I have the word now, she said. He waited. You looked at me like you'd been expecting me, she said. Like I was something you'd been waiting for, without knowing you were waiting. He was very still. Yes, he said. Was that true? That first night? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I've never seen you before, but yes. He held her gaze. From the first moment, from the doorway, there was something that was recognition. I can't explain it better than that. He paused. It frightened me. I don't frighten easily. She looked at him, at the man who was not easy, and not safe, and not simple, who had told her the truth at every turn it mattered, who had loved her specifically and completely, who sat across from her in a stone study on a Sardinian hillside and held her gaze with the absolute quality of someone who was not going anywhere. I know what it was, she said. What was it? Home, she said simply. You were looking at me like I was home. The silence was long and specific. The evening light came through the window. The sea was blue and enormous below the hill, and the island was itself, old and dark and beautiful and enduring. And within it, in a study full of red books and the smell of olive wood and the residual warmth of a year of choosing, a man looked at the woman across from him, with every wall down and every guard abandoned. Yes, he said. For the last time and the first time simultaneously. That's exactly what it was. She stood and went to him, and he rose to meet her, and they held each other in the July evening, with the specific weight of everything behind them and everything ahead, and the island was where it had always been, beneath it all, patient and enduring, the stone under the rain and the stone after, the thing that remained. Outside, somewhere in the house, Alessia was laughing. It had become her favorite thing, laughing, the discovery of it, the way she threw her entire self into the sound, with the complete investment of someone who had found the best thing there was. Valentina heard it, and felt the familiar expansion, wordless and complete. Marco felt her smile against his shoulder. She's been practicing, he said. All week, Valentina said. Every chance she gets. He held her closer. She let him. On the Sardinian island in the 2nd July, the light went long and golden over the olives and the sea, and everything that had been begun in rain was golden in the sun, and in the particular permanent way of things that were real and chosen and meant. It held. It held. 10 months later, on a morning in May, Valentina delivered her own child. A girl. 7 pounds even. She had not been surprised. She had known the weight from the feeling of her, the specific quality of her presence, the way she had moved through the last weeks with the focused deliberateness of someone who had decided on her entrance. She had dark hair, this also she had known, and Marco's quality of stillness, which in a newborn looked like the specific calm of someone who had arrived in the world and was assessing it without alarm. Marco held her for the first time with the expression of a man whose comprehensive competence at every other thing he had ever encountered had been entirely undone by 7 pounds of his own child. He held her, and he looked at her, and he did not say anything for a long time. Then he looked at Valentina. "Does she have a name?" he said. "You tell me," she said. They had talked about names for months, with the specific, pleasurable disagreement of two people who had strong opinions. They had not decided. She had thought, in the final weeks, that he knew the one and was waiting for the right moment. He looked at the baby, at her dark-haired stillness, her quality of patient assessment. "Julia," he said. For his grandmother, for his mother, for the housekeeper who had fed them and witnessed them and been the particular quiet center of the life they had built. "Julia," Valentina confirmed. The May morning came through the window of the room in the north house, where they had put the bed and the good lights, the room they had prepared with the specific care of people who knew what birth required. The sea was blue below the hill. The olive trees were green and full with spring. Somewhere in the house, Caligula was making the sounds of a cat who was very clear about what he thought of the new development and was registering his opinion with the appropriate authority. "She's looking at me," Marco said. "She is," Valentina agreed. "How can she look at me like that? She's 7 minutes old." "She knows you," Valentina said. "She's been listening for 9 months." He looked at her then, from the baby to Valentina, with the expression that was simply him, the complete version, the one with every layer present, the weight of who he was and all it cost, and the love that was not diminished by any of it. "Thank you," he said. She smiled. "That's her job," she said. "And mine." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Julia settled in his arms and reached for Valentina's hand with the hand that was free. She gave it to him. Outside, the May light moved across the island in its long-reaching way, touching everything. The stone and the sea, the olive rows and the vineyard, the north coast and the south, the place where the rain had been, and the place where the sun was now. The island was old and it endured, and beneath everything else, beneath the rain and the violence and the years and the choices and the love, it was simply there, patient and dark and beautiful, as it had always been, as it would always be.